The digital world moves fast, but real growth comes from real conversations. This is e-Coffee with Experts, where marketers and founders share what's actually working in SEO, AI, and digital growth. Grab your coffee and fuel your mind as we chat with top minds about their wins, struggles, and lessons you won't find in a blog post. Brought to you by Digital Web Solutions, we bring real talk to help you grow your business, one episode at a time. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, Victor here, back with the Coffee with Experts, and today I actually brought you kind of a celebrity here. He's not only an expert in several different fields, but he's also very much keen towards how you should raise your wolves. And am I saying something like internally, like men who need to be wolves and providing their families? No, we're talking about literally wolves. And the dogs that we have here, of course, you all know about Popcorn. We can be talking more about Popcorn in the future. But for today, one of the few people, and I'm actually reading this quote because it's brilliant. One of the few people in the world who has raised both wolves and advised CEOs of unicorn startups. We actually have Oliver Starr here, the wolf guy, founder and CEO of LandDragon, which is a consulting firm. If you're going to check it out, the links will be in the description below. And he's also the executive director at the Tahoe Wolf Center. So again, wolves is everything that we're going to be talking about today. And I'm very much glad to have Oliver on the show. Oliver, thank you for coming here. How are you doing today?
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much. I'm good.
Great to know. How are the wolves right now?
So it's summertime here now. And at this time of day, it's already pretty warm. And so we call it snooze o'clock. And what we find is that mostly during this time of day, they're flat. They're just staying out of the sun and staying chill. They were active earlier, and then as the sun starts to go down, they get very active and they start, doing more wolf stuff that is more entertaining.
So that's a general behavior of the species then, because Popcorn is always chilling during the sunny days, and whenever I am off work, meaning whenever I want to chill, that's the time she wants to play.
Yeah, well, they know what your focus is, and they'll decide. I think it looked to me like Popcorn has maybe some border collie.
Yes, that's true.
And so,
And borderline.
That's a working dog. And if you don't give your working dog a job, they'll choose their own job.
I see.
And that job is keeping you busy.
Yes, Popcorn's job is to keep us all busy, but she's the love of her life. She's everything to us.
I get it. My wife and I only have animals, no kids, so we relate. We call them our furry people.
Yeah, and especially, as we love to say, in this economy, it is cheaper, it's more affordable, gives you tons of love and things to do and things to take care about and responsibilities. The only downside about it is how long they last, which is not enough.
Yeah, I really agree. Although maybe not on the cost. It's very expensive to have wolves. It's a little different than dogs.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I've told my wife more than once, if I could finish with my animals, I would give up the balance of the life to end at the same time as them, just because I don't want to be without them. It's hard when you lose your companions, for sure.
It is hard. And the cost part about it all, as you said, is something else that we would spend hours talking about here. But I want to actually start our conversation talking about costs, because for the intro that I just gave, people would be wondering that we're going to be talking about raising wolves and talking about a lot of things animal related, but you are an entrepreneur and you started things and you have run things and you have advised CEOs. What was the moment where you decided to start it up? How did it start? How did you feel when you were starting working maybe 9-to-5 corporate jobs in relation to raising wolves?
So I've never been great at the 9-to-5 corporate culture. I was a professional athlete, and so I was used to having a lot of autonomy as an athlete. And I think that this is probably true. I mean, as an athlete, you're sort of an entrepreneur with your body being your business. And so I think you'll find that a lot of high-level athletes don't really find a fit in typical 9-to-5 corporate culture. We have a different kind of discipline, and that discipline, I think, has potential to lend itself to entrepreneurial pursuits because you're good at self-reliance and you're good at, most athletes are pretty good at suffering, because being a really good athlete requires a lot of suffering. And as I'm sure many of your listeners are aware and listen to Alex Hormozy, and he's like, listen, it's simple. You just got to be willing to suffer a lot for a long time to get what you want. And that's sport, and I think that's also entrepreneurship. I don't think anybody who's a successful entrepreneur found that it was easy. It only looks easy after.
Yeah. And during the time where you were growing yourself, you were also a blogger at TechCrunch, which is still a media that a lot of folks utilize and go through and visit to this day. So You're also very knowledgeable in regards to the media world, in regards to PR, in regards to how things work, promotional related. Did this also help you during your time building up your companies?
Probably it should have helped me more
Oh, nice to know.
because, I mean, I had the knowledge and the skills, but the thing is that there's only so many things that somebody can do in a day.
That is true.
I honestly knowing the value of really good, and the thing is, it's hard to find really good PR. I'm no offense to the good PR agencies out there, but I've been the interface and one of the things I've done for a lot of the companies that I've been with as a consultant is sort of act as that interface between like their PR and their comms and the company itself. And what I would tell an entrepreneur is if you're hiring a PR agency because you want it to deliver, and this is always the phone call is I want 3 articles in top tier media. I want 5 articles in tier B media. I want 25 articles in tier C media. And then the PR, right. And then the PR says, okay, what's the story? And then it's, we raised $1 million from the CEO is always going to frown when the PR says, right, I need news, right? It's very, the problem is that the media is in, as people didn't understand this either, as a writer at TechCrunch, and I was the first employee there, on a daily basis, I was getting between 500 and 1,000 inbound emails. I felt like Newman from Seinfeld. It just keeps coming. It never stops. You do your best to get, but it never. And so you have to choose the cream of the crop. And everybody wanted to be in TechCrunch, right? And I would have, I remember there was one particular time when companies were just starting with like these short video clip apps. It's funny, my background just switched without my choice, but you're getting a slideshow. That's New Naryak, one of my wolves.
Amazing.
And
even better.
So I covered 3 of them that were the most innovative and sort of the first movers. And then the 4th one wrote to me and it wasn't as interesting and it was a little late to the party. And so I just declined, and then they got mad and they started writing letters to Michael Arrington telling him to fire me because I wasn't covering them. Mike had my back, of course. But what they didn't realize is that, first of all, we're catering to an audience too, and we have to be the filter that decides what's interesting to the audience, right? What are they going to come back tomorrow for? But the other thing, and this was especially true in the earliest days of TechCrunch. I mean, in the very first 2 to 3 years of TechCrunch, when we were really the most important technology blog in the world, we weren't just a media outlet. We were also a very important preliminary vetting system for venture fund. And we were very careful.
Okay.
We really understood, the VCs were talking to us all day, every day. What's cool? What do you see? What would you invest in? I mean, that's what I ultimately.
Well, that's very interesting.
And the challenge was that we were aware of our limitations. And so what we did not want to do was we also understood that if we give a company a bad review, like a really bad review, that might really be devastating for their possibilities in the future. And so we were very often made the decision somewhat, and it was hard for these companies to understand this, like number 4 in this particular example, that we were actually somewhat protective of them by not covering them, because if we gave them our typical unbiased, hard-edged, truly analytical review, we might actually sink their battleship. And maybe
They
we
wouldn't
were
like it.
Maybe, yeah. Well, it may be that they were talking to VCs and then they get a crap review on TechCrunch and the VCs are like, sorry, we're done. And maybe we missed something, maybe, and so we were actually, we wanted this ecosystem to explode, which it did. We deeply cared about the ecosystem that we were covering, right? And I think that because of where we were in the industry and the time in the industry, we were very unique. I think much more unique than any blog is today. We were literal kingmakers. I mean, it was in every startup's business plan at some point in their MVP range, get into TechCrunch. It was that important. And so we understood how critical that positioning was in the industry, and we really respected the entrepreneurs. And sometimes they just didn't understand that our unwillingness to cover was actually protective, not pejorative towards them. And in this case, ultimately what happened was they were so nasty and so persistent that I finally gave them the review they asked for, but not the review they wanted.
I think Rivian would love having you on board. Last year, when MKBHD gave them the analysis of the Polestar, and I'm actually not sure if the Polestar, but do you know what I'm talking about? Rivian, EV maker, was reviewed by one of, I think, YouTube's greatest tech reviewer, and because of his bad review, they say it was because of him, but they went bankrupt after the video was live. This literally happened.
That's funny because I see California Rivians are popular. I see a lot of Rivians, and I have a neighbor that has two of them, and he loves them. I mean, the problem for me is they're not big enough. I need when my vehicles are all purchased with the idea that I might have to move a Wolf. And for those of you that are listening out there, we're not talking figuratively. So, as the executive director of the Tahoe Wolf Center. And so my background is carnivore biology. My career as an entrepreneur is by necessity because there is no money as a carnivore biologist, and I'm not well suited to working for state agencies. But my passion is wildlife, most specifically wolves, teaching the world about this incredibly maligned, misunderstood, but critically important species. And so when we say wolves, we're really talking about wolves. The animal behind me in this particular screen right now.
Wall Street, the one where we're talking about.
Yeah, this is the wolf of the wild woods. This one here named Nunariak I rescued from the illegal wildlife trade. And so yeah, they're big animals. They're a little smaller than a Great Dane, bigger than a German Shepherd. You need a big vehicle, and they're terrible to your cars. In fact, just the other night, my wife and I had a wolf in the car, and we were a little bit negligent to pay attention to what she was doing, and we looked back, and she had chewed the driver's side seatbelt out of the vehicle while my wife was wearing it. And that's not an uncommon occurrence. We've lost 4 or 5 seatbelts over the years.
This is actually a great thing to talk about. First, let me just correct myself. It's not Rivian, it's Fisker, the company that was doing
Fisker.
EVs.
Okay.
And then Fisker went bankrupt. Again, there's a whole debacle about it, but they went bankrupt because of a review from a famous YouTuber. So relating that to TechCrunch in your story, you see that up to this day,
watch out what you ask for, because you might get what you ask for, but not what you want.
Exactly.
And it's unfortunate that those things happen, but on the other hand, good media, and I think we're lacking good media. I mean, I am less so in the tech media, but in the general news media, and even to a certain degree in the tech media, I think we've lost a level of skepticism. And I'm a natural skeptic. It's funny. Chase Hughes, who you may have seen, the former FBI, who does a lot about how to improve yourself and how to read faces and everything. Like this crease.
I follow him.
Yeah, I do too. So this crease here, he says people that have that crease are skeptical people, right? Because they're always doing that, right? They're wrinkling their eyes and they make a permanent crease in their face. And I'm sure it's true. I'm super skeptical. I mean, the first time somebody says anything to me, I'm like, do I really believe this? Right? It's unfortunate because he says Botox won't fix it. I'd like. But a journalist should be skeptical. A good journalist, yes. See, I think you're a nicer person, but I'm super skeptical. Like my first inclination is I don't believe it, and then I have to go check it out. And I think that that's important for journalists. And I would love to see a return to more skeptical journalism. I'm sad about where journalism, particularly, like I said, particularly news media, but even tech media. And I think part of it is also with the death of sort of the advertising model as it existed. Prolific production has become the real pressure. And as a journalist, being a prolific producer and being a skeptical inquirer are not necessarily the same.
Not only in journalist terms, but also influencer terms. With the growth of influencer marketing, you started losing credibility because a lot of people were claiming to be something, where in reality, they were just good at talking in the camera. So you naturally started questioning whenever somebody said, oh, I'm a journalist. Are you? Oh, I'm a researcher. Are you? Oh, I'm a podcaster. Am I? No, just I host a podcast where I talk to nice people, but I never took a course about how to podcast. I don't know how to. Should I look over the camera? Should I look over my screen? Should I do this or should I do that? It's a very different beast telling people that you are something when instead you're just an enthusiast pretending to be something. In regards and in light to this, to what you're just saying, which I totally agree with, we have been working with several publishers and the market has changed so much. How is it that you are operating LandDragon then? Right now, whenever you're building those stories, whenever you're building those storytelling campaigns even, How is it that you're making sure that you're satisfied with yourself?
Well, so for me right now, LandDragon is sort of just the catch-all of the consulting work that I do for various companies. And I'm actually sort of segueing more and more away from it. Although, to be fair, I love working with great, enthusiastic entrepreneurs. My sweet spot for
Oh yeah,
that is sort of.
I'm not talking bad about them. Good point. It's not
Yeah,
that I'm talking bad about them at all. No, no, no.
yeah, no. But I mean, just in terms of what I'm doing in my life right now, is I've sort of, I'm 57. I'm sort of, moving into an older cohort. But that said, I love working with enthusiastic entrepreneurs that are doing things that have the potential to change the world, to make a dent in the universe, right? I mean, my last major client that I worked with for 3 years was Turing. And I mean, we caught a tiger by the tail that was a whirlwind, right? So Turing was one of the first companies that was really scaling remote work, remote
Mm-hmm.
development team.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started, I think there were 4 or 5 people around the table, and they hired me to help with some of their social media and their messaging, to ghostwrite for the CEO, to handle that kind of stuff, their blog. And it was a hard road, and then COVID hit, and everyone went remote. And the world realized that, especially with development teams, remote was really efficient. And they went unicorn and then decacorn in 2 years. It was I mean, it was, every day there'd be 10 new people. Like, the hiring was so, and eventually they got to a scale where they needed people, not, my role was 8 roles, and they were hiring, very, very, very skilled people to replace my contribution, to the point where they really didn't need me anymore, just because the people that they brought on full time, in an office, were as or more skilled than me. But it was a very interesting thing to work with Jonathan Siddart, the CEO there, and watch him go from he'd been a successful entrepreneur on a small scale to being a needle moving entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. And I really enjoyed that process and watching the company grow. And I have a lot of pride in the contributions I made and the success that they enjoy. But I also realized that, and by the way, if there's somebody out there that is interested to work with me to help grow a company, I've done quite a few, both my own and others, and I enjoy it. But I really am selective now in who I work with. I want super interesting, open-minded people that want to learn and grow. But in the interim, of course, I run my nonprofit, which is a big focus of mine, and I'm trying to scale that in a different way. Mostly that has to do with legalities about zoning. I want to take an old golf course and convert it to a wolf science center. And to do that requires some pretty complex zoning. And so I'm working through those processes now. And once I get that, then we'll really start aggressively fundraising. And I come on a podcast and ask for your money to contribute to the plan. But also really interested now. Yeah, I'd be happy to do another one of these if this turns out well for you. So one of the things that I'm really passionate about, I'm actually preparing to do several TEDx talks about this. I've already been selected. So I'll be on TEDx stages later this year in Texas and in Florida. Is this idea about the alpha leader. And I hope let's dig into this for a sec, if you don't mind, because I think it's
No,
really,
I don't. None at all.
the idea of alpha has sort of spread in a unfortunately, in my opinion, cancerous way through society, driven largely by, I would say, the Andrew Tates of the world, who are somewhat misogynist and very aggressive and very loud. And here's the problem, is that the whole concept of being an alpha comes from wolf biology. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that the most aggressive, competitive, biggest, baddest, bullyingest individual rises to the top.
The apex predator, right?
Yeah, but the problem here is that is not based on good science. It's based upon observations of captive wolves who were unrelated, and they formed a pecking order out of necessity. I mean, it was basically prison rules. But the reality is that in the wild, wolf packs are families. They're nuclear families, just like us. And the bigger packs are just tribes of related individuals. They're all related to each other. And so the alphas are really just the parents. And so a big part of what I espouse, because I live it, I work with wolves every day. You don't alpha roll your wolf. You don't dominate your wolf. You don't, that isn't, and it's had terrible consequences for dog training. The dominance dog trainers of the world are doing a tremendous disservice to their clients and to dogs. And the dominance leaders of the world are doing a disservice to their organizations, their employees. I mean, every single one of us, I guarantee, if I say every one of us has had a bad boss, and I know that every person right now, immediately there's a name, that guy right? Or a terrible coach, right? And again, people are like, yeah, I had, I'm sure you could probably think of it right now, whether that was, a teacher, a coach, a parent, if you're unlucky, right? I had the worst little league dad in the world as an athlete. He was so bad that other coaches would ask him to go away. I mean, he was scary. And so I really understand the negative consequences of that kind of leadership. And we know now from the U.S. military, which has a really advanced leadership culture at the high levels. We know from research Google has done with Project Aristotle. We know from leaders like Brené Brown and Simon Sinek, who teach leadership, that a psychological construct of service and safety and altruism and freedom to learn and fail builds more resilient companies, stronger teams, more success that's sustainable. And so a big part of what I'm passionate about now is working with executives and small teams that want to refine their leadership strategies such that both they're modeling real benevolent alpha behavior. You want to be an alpha wolf? Watch an actual wild alpha wolf, the dad. Watch him protect his family. Watch him roll over for his puppies. Understand that benevolence, altruism, stewardship, protection, collective action, right, drive success, not domineering, fear-based, ultra-competitive. I mean, and there are case studies, that some of the greatest companies in the world faltered when they started adopting these strategies of aggression and competition and cutthroat internal politics.
Oliver, let's continue talking about this. I have worked with several different cultures, different bosses from Brazil to here in Europe, to the United States, to even Asia. Of course, only lacking Australia and Oceania and Antarctica. I'm not going to work with penguins. Not even kangaroos.
They might be fun. Penguins are tough.
Yeah, might be. No, they might be awesome, actually. I think they would be one of the best. And one thing that I noticed, though, was the worst bosses that I had, they were very much into the wolf culture. The wrong one. The one as you're trying to debunk right now. And a lot of the similarities between them were that they were trained in the USA. So what I'm saying is, and this has no data to back it up, I'm not talking bad or shit about the USA culture, but I noticed that more of the wolves comes from the USA.
Well, let's talk bad and shit about the USA culture, because I think it deserves a little bit of that. I mean, I would say that we glorify this mistakenly. Yeah. This bad research. It actually didn't originally come from the U.S., but it was popularized by a wolf biologist in the U.S. who was very famous. He still is. His name is David Meach. And his research was done in the 60s at the Brookfield Zoo. He then spent a lot of time on Ellesmere Island watching wild wolves, and he realized he was completely wrong. And for those of you that want to actually see this man recant his mistake, just Google alpha wolf wrong, and you'll see a guy that looks, 20 years older than me, but kind of like me, explain how he made a mistake. And he was so aggrieved by his mistake that his best-selling book called The Wolf, he tried to get it taken out of print. And when he couldn't, he ultimately wrote a new edition correcting those mistakes. But of course, once something gets a
damage was already done.
Yeah, and it's my goal, if there's one thing I can accomplish sort of sociologically in the world through my talks and my coaching and my understanding of wolves, is that I help to transform that mistake into a cultural shift that allows for more benevolence, and that people start to understand that kindness is strength, right? That listening is intelligence, and that empathy is not weakness, but that it takes a lot of strength to be an empathetic person in a hard world. And it doesn't, you don't have to have the loudest megaphone or be the biggest bully. And you don't have to, I'm a fairly slight guy, although I'm pretty tall. I'm 6 feet tall about, but I don't think anybody would see me as a snowflake. I live a pretty rough mountain man lifestyle. I'm very resilient. My day-to-day life is pretty rough, doing construction and working with my animals. But I also am incredibly empathetic, right? Like, I don't kill spiders in my house. I love living things. I really appreciate nature. I want us to preserve and protect it. And I want leaders to be the best listeners they can, to be a source of comfort and communion for their teams. And so, yeah, if you're, and what I really want more than even that is for young people who are just getting into positions of leadership, whether it's the captain of your team or the manager of your shift or, a department lead. There's value in old guys. There's value in guys like me that have been around the block a few times, but who can teach you how to be the most inspirational leader you can be. The leader that people follow, not because they have to, and not even because they want to, but because they almost can't help themselves, right? That level of inspiring leader, look up to them as a mentor and a friend and a trusted confidant. And if you're that kind of leader, you're going to bring people up to a whole new level of their own capabilities, right? The goal of the best leaders is to replace themselves with new leaders, not to insulate themselves so they can never be replaced.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And do you see that the newer, even newer than mine, but the newer generations, Gen Z, for example, do you think that they are walking towards the right direction of understanding leadership, of understanding that, Dad, you're used to a military type of boss. Nah, this doesn't cut anymore. I'm not gonna bow myself. I'm not gonna just blindly accept things just because somebody's higher up than me.
So Gen Z and even the millennial generation is complex, right? They've had access to more information than any generation before. They're very facile with technology. I'd say that culturally and legally, they've had a lot of insulation from, I would say, even harsh criticism. And so being critical of a person who can improve is not a comment on who they are, it's on what they are doing. And I think that too often younger people don't make a good distinction between being criticized for performance and many times, the people I'm most critical of in a gentle way are the ones that I see as having the most potential, right? When I see people that, I just don't feel like they have whatever it is that is going to make them great, the commitment, the curiosity, the determination, whatever it is, I spend less time. They may not get any criticism. I may just leave them be to do whatever. But the people that I'm like, that guy, it could be awesome. I'm going to be more critical, more involved, more direct, more, because that person has the opportunity to really grow. So, but delivering that criticism is, again, it's important to be understanding, to be inquisitive, to make sure that any time you're critical, it's with a kindness and an opportunity to teach, right? Not just you did a shit job, but what happened here, right? There's a difference, right? What happened here? What do you mean? Well, I've seen you do this at this caliber and this looks like this. Did you understand what we were trying to accomplish? Did you have the resources to accomplish it well? Try to understand the nature of a failure and then make sure that the failure didn't occur because of a failure to provide resources, a failure to provide clarity of mission, right? I always try to look at the mirror when I see failure and ask, did the failure occur because of me? Or did the failure occur in spite of me, right? And by being a leader who asks yourself those questions all the time, I think that you become that more inspirational, more approachable leader, not just do what I say because I said so, let's figure out how to do this better, right? That's a better approach. And if you're a really confident leader, and that's the other thing, is that I think that being super aggressive and dominant actually tends to belie a lack of confidence rather than, those leaders tend to never say they were wrong. They never say they made a mistake. It's always someone else's fault. The best leaders, I would say, are confident enough to know that other people around them have better ideas sometimes. They're better at, ideally, you're hiring people to do things because you're not that good at those things.
Yeah.
And so why would you hire somebody that's amazing at something and then not allow them to do their best work, right?
It's insecurity even sometimes, right? They are insecure.
I think it very much is insecurity. I think a lot of alpha bravado, right, is actually a mask for deep insecurity. And
100% agree. 100%.
Sometimes that even manifests itself in, packing on 100 extra pounds of muscle because were bullied a little bit in school. And that's not to denigrate bodybuilders. I actually at one point got very big because I was curious about it. But I'm just saying that, the kindest people in the room are often the strongest and the most confident.
Wow. What a quote. Let me ask you this last question before we close it. And continuing about it, It is easier to be a good, a better leader, a better mentor when you are involved in the day to day, especially when you are in the office, in the same space, in the same group, within reach, right? Just like the wolves, as you said so yourself, they're always walking around, always together, pack off. But the life that we are right now, 2025, meant that a lot of companies and markets and segments work remotely. So for some people, yeah, you can go back to office and you can have a wolf pack around you. For others, no, you're gonna be remote, and it's not your fault. It's not a company's fault. It's just life right now. You should be remote in some areas. You should be in person in others. Do you see the handling of the wolf pack in a remote scenario, in a remote environment, compared to the in-person one?
That's a great question. Listen, I like working remotely with my clients. It's hard for me to travel as much now because it's difficult to leave. There's no dog sitter for wolves.
Yeah.
And so I mean, it depends on the nature of the project and the nature of the team. So if you've got a highly skilled team of people that are experienced and know what they're doing, then you don't need to be as hands-on. You just need to be really accessible, and you need to be really committed to listening. And I would say listening skills are so important, and they are even more important remotely. And it's very easy to not be present when you're on a Zoom call, right? Like people can't really tell if you're actually looking down at your phone and doing something else, right? You can be on your screen and focused on the screen, and people don't know that you're not really present in the call. But if you're a leader, you need to really be mindful and present if you're remote. But you need to invest the time to go see your people or to bring your people to you. And I think that if you really are a largely remote organization, then the company needs to budget for and really engage in offsites where people get together and they do things and they get to know each other and they become friends. I mean, the best teams in the world, generally speaking, at least in my experience, are people that genuinely like one another personally, and given the opportunity, spend time together socially. I'll give you an example just from our recent, my wife is, as I said, an amazing chef. She's an amazing manager of a restaurant team. And our people rent a house together because they like each other so much they hang out all the time, right? They're literally best friends. And because of that, that's a pack, right? They're basically a family. And they help each other out, right? I mean, if somebody's sick, they pull together and pull shifts and do whatever. And it's great for our business, right? Our consistency is amazing. The quality of what we produce is amazing. We're in a town where when there's great snow, a lot of employees call in well so they can go ski. Our team doesn't do that to us. And I mean, that's a very small example, but on a larger scale, my pro cycling teams that I was on that really outperformed, we were really good friends. We really liked each other. And you don't form those relationships if you only see each other on Zoom on your Monday stand-up, So
Yep.
I think that the more remote you are as a leader and as a team, the more intentionality has to exist about building that team. Teams that work together every day, especially if they're well-founded and well-managed, tend to gel and become friends. But it's hard to become friends with somebody that, you have to work at it. And I know, Turing tried hard to do that with, they had a chess club. We had different things on Slack that were sharing things to communicate that were non-business oriented so people could get to be friends. We had a book club. And so we helped people, especially as the company got bigger and bigger and more distributed, identify common interests so that you could build those friendships. And they did invest in doing offsites that were really a smart way to approach it. And so I think even if you're very, very small, you need to take some of that money that is precious. And believe me, I realize that, when you're a startup with $1 million and you're trying to get a product out the door, product is dear. Spending, $1,000 of that very valuable money in bringing your people together, if they're all remote, and getting to know each other for 4 or 5 days off site, even less about business and more about socializing, pays a lot of dividends in the capabilities and performance of teams going forward. And so when I work with organizations, I really espouse building a culture, identifying what that culture is, figuring out what those values are, making sure that everybody in the team already share those values, and that as you bring people in, you look for people that already intrinsically have those values as part of their value set, but also that you make sure everybody is indoctrinated into those values.
That's a very good answer. And I not only do I thank you for that, but I feel like people needed to listen to somebody like you who knows a lot about handling people and wolves, how things should be done nowadays. I do have one last question and then we'll be over. I was
Sure.
actually, while you were talking right now, I was actually thinking about this last question and how we should close it up. And I think I got it. We went through the beginning of your career. We went through your time at TechCrunch and how media was handled back then and how you handle media nowadays with the companies that you're working with. We talked about how people misunderstood the wolf culture. And I'm so happy. This part about the episode for me was very eye-opening because nowadays you have a lot of people talking about the feminine man, the man who is a beta, the blue pill, the opposite of the wrong idea of the wolf as we were just talking about. And for years and years, I saw myself in this wrong pack. The guy who cares, the guy who empathizes with other people. I never try my best to show that I'm a man. And I feel like this has opened doors to me because as you said so yourself, I listen to my friends, I share pain, I share feelings. And if a wolf does that, if he's rolling over to his kids, you bet that I'm going to be rolling over for my kid to have fun. You bet it. I'm definitely going to do that.
Right.
And if people want me to record it, I'm definitely going to do that. So really great to know that we got it all wrong. The wolf culture, that we got it all wrong. I think this is the key takeaway that we can grab from this. But still, talking about wolves, not sure if anybody asked you this, but I feel like me and the audience should. If you were a wolf, what role do you think you'd play in the pack and why?
Well, every wolf, now remember that wolf packs are families, and let's talk for 1 second about the idea of the lone wolf, okay? In popular culture, the lone wolf has a very negative, the lone wolf gunman, right? He was the lone wolf, right? And it's that, as bad as the alpha myth is, the lone wolf myth is probably even sadder. And here's why. A lone wolf is what we technically call a disperser. And a disperser is a wolf that leaves its family group to find love, to find an opposite sex partner and an unoccupied territory and form a pack of his or her own. And so at some point in their lives, a lot of wolves make the decision, I need to, procreate. I want to, it's kind of like your kids going off to college and getting their first apartment and figuring out how to wash their clothes on their own instead of having mom do it, right? And so, we know a lot about that now because there's been some great research in Yellowstone over the last 10 years or so, but it's very dangerous to be a dispersing wolf. And the reason is because wolves are what we call social predators. They kill things much, much bigger than they are, mostly as a team, right? I mean, same as early humans killing a mastodon. Early humans weren't killing mastodons on their own. They were collectively working to kill their food, just like wolves. And so when you're a lone wolf, when you're a disperser and you have to somehow survive, you're in a very tenuous situation because it's hard to kill things bigger than you by yourself. It means you're subsisting on less than ideal diet. And wolves are very territorial. They're kind of tribal like people. And the thing that kills the most wolves in the wild besides humans is other wolves. But it's not wolves from the same family fighting and injuring each other. It's wolf pack versus wolf pack conflict over resources, over territory and resources. And so if you're a lone wolf and you're looking for a mate, it's risky. You might encounter a pack of other wolves who kill you, right? You may see a beautiful female wolf in another pack and you're kind of trying to get her to follow you. So you have to, and there's amazing videos. There's a wolf they called Romeo in Yellowstone who was very clever about recruiting females from other packs, getting them to mate with him, and then he would let them go back to their pack and they would have puppies. And so ultimately his genetics became very widespread in the park, but eventually late in his life, he did become an alpha of his own family group that was very successful, and he turned out to be a great leader of his family, a great and benevolent alpha. So, I mean, I think that the characteristics of the best alpha wolves are that they have sort of a strength of character, right? They're intellectually strong. They are decisive but thoughtful. They don't ready, fire, aim. They ready, aim, fire. You see, there's a behavior we look for in animals called leveling versus sharpening. And what happens is leveling is, oh my God, what happened? right? And then they kind of calm down and try to figure out. Alphas, natural alphas tend to have that same stimulus and they go, what just happened? And they actually calm and focus
There's a difference.
into and make a difference, right? Like, puppies, a car backfires and they run in 9 directions, right into trees, whatever, right? And the alpha, the car backfires and he goes, is that a threat? Is that an opportunity? And that's the natural leader. I believe now, and I even talk about this in my book, that all wolves eventually grow into sharpeners as they get experience and they have a repertoire in their brain of all the things that happen and what they mean. It's easy to be startled when everything is new. But I would like to think that I would be, I think I'm a good leader of people. And I think that the characteristics that make me a good leader of people would have made me a good leader of a wolf family. So, but again, the term alpha is really just dad. I think I'm a great dad to my wolves. My wife and I are sort of paternal of the people that work for us, especially in the restaurant business. You have a lot of younger people, right? We believe in teaching. I have an interesting example. Every once in a while, an employee will come to us and say, "Hey, can I have a loan or an advance?" And we are pretty generous about that with our people, with a caveat. We don't write a loan document and give them payment terms. We're a little flexible. But what we expect is integrity. And so if you say, I'm going to give you $300 on every one of my paychecks until I pay you back, and if they don't, then there's a teaching moment. And so, for example, recently, we had an employee that did that. We loaned him some money a while ago. And he did good for a minute, and he was still working for us, so it wasn't like he was gone. He kind of slipped up and just stopped making the payments he was supposed to my wife. And she let a week go, 2 weeks. On the 4th week, she said, "Hey, what's going on here? We had an agreement, and he had some reason, and he cleared it up. But now recently, he came back to us, and he said, "Hey, can I get a loan for $2,000? And my wife said, "Well, let's talk about what happened last time. Last time we gave you an opportunity and and he kind of understood. And so we said, so this time we're going to handle this a little differently. And we're going to do something slightly different so you understand the consequences of not honoring a commitment on your own, not making us come to you to ask what's going on." So he's learned, we're still benevolent. We're still going to make sure he's not in trouble. He has a little problem with rent, right? We're going to take care of it, but in a slightly different way so that he understands that integrity has value and lack of integrity has consequences. And it's not terribly painful for him, but it's still a teaching moment.
Perfect. I think this whole episode was a teaching moment. Make him watch it. He'll like it, for sure.
He lives it. My wife is his boss. He lives it. Every day is a teaching moment with my wife.
Yeah, that must be the case. Well, Oliver, just really, really thank you for all the time, all the knowledge, all the stories, all the funs, everything that you have taught us. I imagine that a lot of people had clicked on the video to learn about business, but at the end, I think we all learn way more about life and how we should treat business inside our lives than anything else. Right?
I think that's a great way to wrap it up. Business is such a big part of our lives that the better you are at living, the better you'll be at business, I think.
That is for sure. That is for sure. Well, we stay here. Oliver, once again, thank you so much for everything. Everyone who's watching us to this moment, if you haven't done so already, which is kind of weird, do follow Oliver the Wolf Guy on his Instagram. Links will be down in the description below. You can find him in the other links as well. We're going to be putting all social medias as well as all his companies up below. But of course, engage, do your likes, give your comments. He's doing something that not everybody is doing, and we have to praise the man. Oliver, thank you so much for being an amazing expert. We wish you success in your future endeavors. We'll definitely have you on the show later on to talk about what's to come and the success that you're going to bring. Sounds good?
So much. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. That's it. See you all on the next time.